The morning sun illuminated the dusty airstrip at Key West in October 1927. As a group of entrepreneurs took the most risky step of their lives. The salt wind blew through the air, and damp air from the sea created droplets on the metal wings of the airplanes. Thus, Pan American World Airways began its journey simply to carry mail, but no one knew it would soon change the world. Unlike Yale graduates who thought in charts and reports, young aviation enthusiast Juan Trippe thought in maps and geographical discoveries. His vision was simple: to create an air bridge connecting all continents. In the early years, everything looked like a battlefield. A small flotilla, few pilots, and the endless sky above the Caribbean. Trippe played every card he held. Government contracts, secret deals, sometimes exploiting legal loopholes. By the 1930s, Pan Am was no longer just an airline. It had become the aerial extension of American soft power. The chosen instrument concept was born. State support, diplomatic touches, and the foundations of a global empire were laid. Flight crews appeared before passengers in stylish ties and clean uniforms. This was not merely travel, it was a ceremony. The moment you stepped through Pan Am's doors, you ceased to be an ordinary citizen and became a member of the global elite. The magnificent Clipper flying boats, as they crossed the Atlantic and Pacific, the white tablecloth service in the restaurant, the wine list, and the moonlight over the clouds, visible when you woke up at midnight and looked out the window, all recalled a fairy tale. In the 1950s, Pan Am was the world's most recognized commercial brand. Mentioned alongside Coca-Cola, the company Hollywood heroes wanted to fly, the choice of prime ministers and presidents. Every new route opening featured wild celebrations, floods of journalists, and nationalist enthusiasm, all indicating the world was shrinking, and Pan Am was the artist of this shrinkage. Yet, every empire carries seeds of decay within it. By the late 1960s, air transport market regulation began to change. Competition grew in domestic flights, prices dropped, new players emerged. Though still considered king of international flights, Pan Am remained helpless in the domestic market. The board failed to see this problem for a long time, or chose not to. They still watched from the glass towers they built around themselves, observing how the world spun from afar. Our brand is enough, they thought. But the market now respected price and flexibility, not brands. When the Airline Deregulation Act passed in the United States in 1978, everything changed overnight. Pan Am had been protected under the government's wing for years. Now it was thrown into a brutal competitive arena. The company's structure, massive workforce, outdated management style, all began to work like an anchor. While competitors, particularly American Airlines and Delta, strengthened domestically, then entered the international scene, Pan Am couldn't find time to look back. Some analysts said the company's stock was expensive, but its strategy was cheap. These words were actually a death sentence. In the early 1980s, company executives sought a way out by deciding to acquire National Airlines in Florida. This became one of history's worst aviation mergers. Pan Am's cosmopolitan, international culture never merged with National's domestic, provincial character. The clash of two different corporate cultures resulted in hundreds of experienced pilots and ground staff being laid off, customer service weakened, and short-haul flights that couldn't compete with railways generated losses. This mistaken merger plunged Pan Am into billions of dollars of debt and stopped the cash flow. Deliberate delays in management decisions, some leaders' personal ambitions, risky financial operations, mortgaging the company's future, all followed one after another. When December 1988 arrived, the disaster took not just financial, but human form. Above Lockerbie, Pan Am Flight 103 exploded. 259 passengers and 11 local residents perished. This terrorist act cast a shadow over the company and crushed its image to the ground. The company, once known as the world's safest airline, was now associated with murder and negligence. Court battles, families' cries, accusations regarding security procedure gaps all consumed the company's energy, attention, and remaining money. Some passengers hesitated when buying Pan Am tickets. For an airline, this is a fatal disease. The loss of trust. When the Gulf War began in 1990, oil prices skyrocketed. Pan Am's old, fuel-guzzling Boeing 747 fleet now looked like a whirlpool. Every flight brought losses. The company began selling assets: the Tokyo Tower, hotels, airport slots. But this was like carrying water in a sieve. Debts had grown so large that revenues only covered interest payments. Employee salaries were delayed, technical maintenance of aircraft became difficult, and tension was visible on passengers' faces. Pilots whispered in the cockpit whether the company would survive until tomorrow. In January 1991, the company officially declared bankruptcy. Final flights were organized, but no one was surprised anymore. That day, there was a strange silence at airports. When Pan Am's blue logo aircraft touched down on runways for the last time, an era ended. For years, the company that conquered the world, connected continents, and served as one of the Cold War's shields would now be placed between history book pages. For many, this was not just the death of a corporation, but the end of flight's romance, travel's magic, and grand dreams. Looking back at history, we see Pan Am's collapse was not merely the result of unfortunate events, terrorist attacks, or oil crises. It was a classic example of strategic blindness, managerial arrogance, and inability to adapt to a changing world. The company was too big to turn around, too confident to take competitors seriously, too outdated to adopt innovations. During the deregulation era, Pan Am's leaders still tried to play the game with 1950s tactics. The market was changing rapidly. Passengers were hunting for discounts. The company relied on service quality, but forgot that quality costs money. And the average passenger simply wanted to get from point A to point B. The National Airlines acquisition was a painful lesson. Growth for growth's sake is impossible. Mergers must serve strategic goals. Pan Am tried to attach itself to a body that didn't fit, and that body tore it apart. The Lockerbie tragedy showed that no brand holds immunity against terror. The company had made serious security flaws, but instead of openly discussing corporate cultural problems, it preferred to hide them. There was no transparency. Employees' trust in the company had shattered during difficult days. Forgetting that an organization's greatest asset is its people is particularly fatal for an airline. Finally, financial illiteracy and risk mismanagement. When Pan Am sold assets, it lost long-term revenue sources for short-term liquidity rather than reducing debt. Long-term leases were signed to buy aircraft, but revenues didn't increase as expected. When oil prices rose, the company had no hedging strategy. No financial tools were used to stabilize fuel costs. Everything hung in the air on tourist seasons, political situations, weather conditions. Pan Am's story teaches us that empires die too. Even those flying highest in the sky can fall to earth. Success must not remain in the past. It must be constantly re-earned. When competition conditions change, leaders either adapt or perish. The balance of strategic vision, operational flexibility, and financial reserves is vital in any organization. From the day Pan Am lost this balance, no one could hear the clock ticking decisively, but the result was inevitable. Today, traces of Pan Am can still be found in airports. Logos on some elderly workers' shirts, advertising posters in antique shops, or those magnificent flights in veteran pilots' memories. When they speak, their voices tremble, their eyes moisten. Because back then, flying was truly different. Pan Am was both a company and a symbol of a dream. Its collapse showed that dreams cannot withstand poor management, blind strategic decisions, and unstoppable events. When every company feels eternal, it must not forget that history will teach it a lesson. Pan Am learned this lesson too late, too painfully, and with its last breath.